Good morning, everybody. Welcome to class number 3 of our 2024 Virtual HOA Condo Academy. The topic today is turning challenges into triumphs, and we're going to be talking about strategic solutions for HOAs and condo woes. So where do we go from here? In this class, we're going to provide solutions for HOAs and condos who are facing serious problems, including aging infrastructure, inadequate income, budget planning, fraud, and more. So good morning, everybody, to those of you who are joining us here today. I'm not exactly sure how many people we have joining us by the minute, but it looks like a bunch of people are joining as we go. Welcome to class number 3 of our firm's 2024 Virtual HOA and Condo Academy. We teach these classes in partnership with the cities of Avondale, Chandler, Glendale, Goodyear, Mesa, Peoria, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Surprise, and Tempe. My name is Beth Mulcahy, and I'm the managing partner and senior attorney for the Mulcahy Law Firm in Phoenix, Arizona. I've enjoyed representing HOAs and condominiums for over 27 years. My firm currently represents over 1,000 planned communities and condominium associations throughout the state of Arizona. I also currently serve on my HOA and condo board and have for many years. Before we get started, I'd like to start off by getting a feel for who's joining us here today, so I can tailor the information to best serve you. We're going to be launching 2 polls at the same time, one on Zoom and one on Facebook Live. And basically, if you're joining us on Zoom, you'll see a question on the screen that asks you, which city do you reside in? The second question is, let us know your current role. Are you a board member, community manager, interested homeowner, or other? If you're joining us on Facebook Live, what we'd like you to do is participate by placing in the comments section which city you live in, meaning which association you live in, which city it's located in Arizona, and then let us know what your current role is with your association. Are you on the board? Are you a homeowner that's interested who's not on the board? Are you a community manager that works with associations, or are you something else? And while we're waiting for those poll results to come back, we're going to talk a little bit about what's on today's agenda. In today's session, I'm going to provide a summary first of the HOA and condo bills that are pending in the Arizona legislature this year. And then we're going to discuss the topic of today, which of course is how do we turn challenges into triumphs in an association. We're going to be talking about aging infrastructure, not having enough money, inadequate income, how you can budget plan your way out of problems, fraud and embezzlement. And so we're going to be hitting a number of difficult topics that associations are facing that sometimes board members find that the challenges are so serious that lots of times they just quit because they don't know how to get out of the problem. So we're here to give you solutions and to talk about how you can beat these problems. Also, as always, there will be a free question and answer session at the end of today's class. So we encourage you to submit your questions in the Q&A box on Zoom or on the comments section on Facebook Live. And we promise you that we will answer every question that comes in today during this session. We do ask, however, that you limit it to 1 question per person. And we ask that you please be as specific as possible and as clear as possible, as it's really difficult to follow up on the questions doing this type of a format. So if I don't understand the question, sometimes it's really hard for me to answer it when we're doing a live presentation like this. So please be clear and be concise, and that will help us greatly answering the questions. Okay, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the Arizona legislature. They have been in session since Monday, January 8th. And this has been a big legislative year. There are 32 bills that have been introduced this year regarding HOAs and condominiums. There are a number of duplicate bills, meaning that there's 2 or 3 bills that may say similar things and be on the similar topics. So although it's a large number of, over 30 bills, really there's only a few meaty ones that we're really carefully following. The different bills that have been introduced this year are touch base on a wide variety of topics, and they cover assessments, meetings, making records requests, short-term rentals, the powers that the association has, the board has, flags, liens, and elections. There are really 10 bills right now that we're focusing on that have moved out of committees. So, typically the process to have a bill become the law in Arizona is that it has to be passed by both chambers, so the House and the Senate, and then it has to be signed by the governor. Before it passes either of the chambers, it usually goes through committees, and then it goes to the chamber, wherever the committee is located in that chamber for a vote. So there's 10 bills out of the 32 that have been introduced so far this year that we're really watching. And those are the bills that have moved out of committees already. So let's discuss the bills just very briefly. So there's Senate Bill 1016 that deals with flagpoles. Senate Bill 1432 that talks about unlawful restrictive covenants. House Bill 2119 that talks about HOA fees. House Bill 2141 that talks about interior improvements and condominiums. House Bill 2460 that deals with public roadways and planned communities. And I think the point of that bill is to reverse what was passed last year, talking about, in planned communities, associations that have public roads, and can the association regulate the streets or not? They're going to do a total, 180 and try to change that back this year. House Bill 2575 deals with HOA powers. House Bill 2648 deals with liens and assessments. House Bill 2662 talks about meeting agendas. House Bill 2698 talks about declarant or developer control. And then last but not least, House Bill 2861 talks about termination of condominiums. As I said before, those are the 10 bills that we're closely following right now. There are 22 bills that have not moved out of committee, and those are probably not going to go anywhere this year. We don't like to spend a ton of time analyzing these bills this early in the legislative session. So the legislature in Arizona opened in the first, 2 weeks of January, and we're, now edging towards the end of March. And, we'll start talking about the bills. We don't want to get everybody fired up. And these bills change, from time to time on a weekly or monthly basis. The content of the bills change. And so we are going to wait a little bit to do like a deep dive on the bills until we really see a bill that's, cranking and moving forward. And we think you need to know about it, whether it's telling our legislature that we're in favor of it or opposed to it. We'll be discussing it during First Fridays and also in these virtual neighborhood services HOA Academy. So probably starting in April or May, depending on how far along the legislature is this year. We'll be talking more about the bills that we think are actually going to pass this year. As always, we have a great legislative summary that we put out for anybody who's interested in following the bills. We do update this frequently when the legislature is in session. Our office is going to be sharing the link to the 2024 legislative summary to you on Zoom and on Facebook Live. So you're welcome to take a look at that. Don't forget that we also have this updated regularly, and it's posted on our website at mulcahylawfirm.com. So if we're in between classes and you want to check out what's going on at the legislature, you can just go right to our webpage at mulcahylawfirm.com. And on the homepage is a link to the most updated version of what's going on in the legislative session, our cheat sheet summary of the pending bills. Okay, let's go back and talk a little bit about the poll results. So our poll question number 1 was, which city do you live in? We have 14% from Chandler, 1% from Goodyear, 1% from Glendale, 5% from Goodyear, 17% from Mesa, which that's like actually really high. We don't normally have that many from Mesa, so great job. 6% from Peoria, 21% from Phoenix, 20% from Scottsdale, 12% from Surprise, and 5% from Tempe. So also really great that we have Tempe and Surprise with such good numbers this month. We didn't have anybody today from Avondale, but we will focus on them next month and try to make sure that we get people to join us next month on our Zoom and Facebook Live. Today, I'm happy to say that we have 136 people who are with us live right now. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. In terms of the poll question on what is your current role, We have 73% of you today are board members, which is, I think, probably one of the highest percentages we've ever had of board members. So great turnout. It's probably because of the topic, right? Dealing with the most difficult problems that associations are facing. We have 7% that are managers, so welcome. 19% interested homeowners, and then 1% other. So great turnout today. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Appreciate that. Okay, let's get right into our topic for today. Turning challenges into triumphs, strategic solutions for HOA and condo woes. So just kind of as some like introductory remarks before we get into, the nitty gritty on some different handouts we're going to give you. Serving on a board is hard. For those of you, for the 73% of you who are on the call here today, you already know that, right? There's challenges with homeowners maybe not complying with their documents. There's challenges with difficult owners who, complain about things and make your job really difficult being on the board. There's also really big challenges, like overreaching challenges that keep you up at night. And those are the ones that we're going to be talking about here today. And some just kind of some starting points that I would say is I've served on my board on and off now for over 14 years. And our board has dealt with some pretty serious challenges, frankly. And there have been times for sure where I've thought about quitting being on the board because it is just such a thankless job. And it's hard to get all the moving parts working together. So the board may be really motivated to address an issue, but maybe the manager isn't as focused as we need the manager to be, or maybe you've got a new manager. The manager keeps changing. Or maybe your board isn't totally in alignment on how things should be done. And so maybe you don't have a majority of the votes to deal with a really serious issue that's facing your association. So these are hard issues for associations. So one thing that I want to start out and say is make sure that you're reaching out to your trusted advisors as you're dealing with these challenges in your association. So your management team, your attorney, your reserve specialist, all of these different, maybe if you have a structural engineer that you work with, all of these different trusted advisors are here to help you navigate these problems and help you make good decisions for your association. So that would be kind of my first point would be, hey, it's tough to be on the board. I get it. I'm on my board and I've thought about quitting many times. I stick it out because I love my community and I want to, make improvements because I plan to be here a long time. So number one, you have a hard job. Number two, many of these obstacles can be overcome that we're going to talk about today, but you need to work as a team, as a board. You need to work together and you need to bring in trusted advisors to help you navigate the problem because many times you may not have spent your whole life getting ready to be a board member, right? And you may not have a lot of expertise on how to fix, a serious structural issue in your condo high rise, or you may not have the expertise to figure out, how to get enough money to pay to have the pool resurfaced if you can't get the voter to membership to approve a special assessment or whatever. And so your trusted advisors are here to help you navigate the problems and to help bear the burden of the weight of the problems that you're dealing with. Okay, let's talk about our first problem. This is a big one. In Arizona, I think I've been around for a long time now. I started my firm in November of 1996. And so one thing that I can say, having been in the industry, for over a quarter of a century is, the way that Arizona was developed is that one of my first home that I ever bought was actually one of the oldest associations in Arizona. It's created in 1967. But here's kind of like the timeline in Arizona. And here's why this is important is that, most of the development in Arizona, there was, some development in the 60s and the 70s, but most of the development in Arizona, like the explosion of housing in Arizona took place in the 80s the 90s and the early 2000s until there was kind of the correction in the market in 2006, 7, 8, 9, when things really slowed down a little bit. So what we're dealing with right now is a lot of associations were developed in this, 20 to 30 year period. So, and a lot of these associations that were developed in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, they've been around a while, and your infrastructure is, in need of updating, possibly. Maybe it's failing. The nature of boards is that boards, change every year. And so, there may not be a lot of continuity of board members on your board who can see a project from start all the way to finish. And so, that's problematic. So we're dealing with right now in Arizona, I'm seeing this in my practice every single day. That's why we decided to teach this class, is that we have associations that were developed, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and their infrastructure is in need of repair or in need of updating, and the board doesn't have enough continuity to get the job done, or maybe the management company is changing all the time. And, we need to come up with some ideas and plans for these associations as they, navigate the aging process, so to speak, so that we can keep them healthy. Okay, so we have a great resource for you that we're going to be sharing with you on aging infrastructure. So for those of you who may not be familiar with it, the Community Associations Institute is a national think tank located in the Washington, D.C. area. I think it's in Virginia, very close to the Washington, D.C. area. And the entire purpose of this organization is to provide information to board members, homeowners, and property managers about important topics pertaining to associations. And the CAI has been around for many years, probably was created in the late 70s, early 80s. And it's just a wonderful resource that has a wealth of information for associations. And one of the topics that they recently talked about was aging infrastructure. And so we're sharing with you their handout on this. And kind of, I think the main points that we want to talk about on aging infrastructure is it's a pressing concern for community associations throughout the U.S., not just in Arizona. And it can impact safety and the well-being of residents. I think a really great example of this is, the Surfside Tower collapse in Surfside, Florida. What a horrible tragedy for our industry. And how did that high-rise condo get to that place where the building was so deteriorated that it ultimately ended up collapsing, or a portion of the building ultimately ended up collapsing, and many people passed away as a result of that building collapsing. So, I think that probably, in my mind, it was probably a turning point for me in terms of this aging infrastructure issue is so serious that now we're talking about life and health and safety issues for our residents if the board isn't making good decisions, or if we can't get the residents to approve the special assessment. So this is a pressing concern, and it can impact, lives of people, especially in high rises. Aging infrastructure also poses financial challenges for HOAs and condos, and that really requires preparation to manage those financial problems, right, that associations have, and unexpected expenses that may come up due to the aging infrastructure. I know currently my association that I'm on 2 boards right now. One board is the sub-association board, and I'm on the master association board. The master association board that I'm on is 50 years old. And they're basically, everything is falling apart in our community. And one of the things that we're trying to do is bring in a company to help us do a master plan for our community. And part of that is, plan for basically the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 15 years. And that's a really great thing to do. However, unfortunately, my community, we can't even agree as a board, our master board, that we want the master plan. Of course, I want this, but we have a majority of the members of this board that don't want it. They're scared because they think it's going to cost a lot of money to start this whole master plan, Pandora's box. And so it's a challenging situation, right? And it's frustrating because I see the decay and I see the fact that our structures need to be updated, but I can't do anything about it because I don't have the votes. And so, there are financial challenges if you don't have enough money to pay for, the infrastructure that's aging. That's where my community is right now. There's also our, team challenges. Let's face it, being on a board is like being a member of a team. And if your team can't agree to row in the same direction, you're like aimlessly wandering through, this situation, and we don't get anything done. And that's obviously not good. And that type of situation can lead to something, tragic, like what happened in Surfside. So we have to be strategic and really try to talk through these issues as a board. We talked a little bit about aging infrastructure. It impacts us from a safety and well-being of residents. There's financial considerations because we may not have enough money, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. There's frustration of serving on the board and not being able to get a majority to handle these issues, to come up with a plan to handle these issues. Something that we see commonly in associations is that associations are often overlooking serious structural and system failures, opting instead for Band-Aids, caulking and walking, just doing temporary fixes instead of actually, addressing the bigger problem. And so, another issue on this aging infrastructure is, associations might be covering up more serious problems by just putting Band-Aids on it. And that can lead to, catastrophic results too. Okay. In response, the CAI's foundation did a task force in 2018, and they, it involved different industry experts who weighed in on this. That's interesting. This occurred in 2018. The Surfside collapse, I think, was 2020. To identify what are the biggest issues that are facing associations, and how can we prepare associations for addressing inevitable infrastructure problems. And so we're going to be sharing this information on the task force for you. I mean, it's a couple of years outdated, of course, but it has some great information about, how other associations throughout the entire United States, are handling these issues and what industry experts are suggesting. Interestingly, a survey by CAI also revealed that 81% of respondents are encountering currently unanticipated infrastructure issues over a 3-year period, underscoring the importance of informed decision-making for community asset investment. The task force discovered that repairs were often only initiated when liability and life and safety issues of the residents became concerning and intolerable. And negligence on the part of the board to allow ongoing issues, cleanups, and restorations to be done can also lead to additional unknown hidden costs and frankly, liability to the board. If we go back and untangle the Surfside case, I mean, basically everybody was sued, right? The association's board, the management company, the association's attorney, I mean, everybody was named in the lawsuit. And so, these are all really important issues that we need to be discussing. So again, we shared with you the CAI publication, Breaking Point, Examining Infrastructure and Community Associations. And that's a really good resource for all of you to be looking at. Okay, so how do we handle if we have aging infrastructure problems? How, as a board, can we overcome this? And I have a couple suggestions, having been through this with other associations. So we briefly talked about bringing your board together to talk about this issue. And honestly, this is such a big issue for most associations that this should just be a meeting that is dedicated entirely to talking about what's going on with our infrastructure in our association, the pools, the tennis courts, the washes, the streets, the clubhouse, really any amenity that you have. And a good starting point would be look at your reserve study. Have you had a reserve study done, in the past 5 years? If you haven't, you really do need to update it because inflation and a number of other things, you want to get that reserve study updated. And honestly, that's a really good starting point for a discussion if you're talking about aging infrastructure. For those of you quickly that don't know much about reserves funds or reserve studies, we have a great cheat sheet on this topic, which we are sharing with you on what is a reserve fund, what is a reserve study. Basically, the bottom line on it is it's a budgeting guide that will provide a comprehensive plan to show how to, fund long-term capital improvements for your community. And usually it's done with like a 30-year window in terms of the useful life of all of your amenities and capital improvement projects. And it just gives you a plan for how much to be putting aside each year so that when the aging infrastructure, comes due or to be replaced, you have that money already planned out and in a special reserve account so that you can pay for it. You don't have to do a special assessment. So one thing I would suggest, if you're dealing with large infrastructure, aging issues, have a special meeting, like I said, and only talk about this issue. It should be outside of the regular board meeting. You should be getting an updated reserve study because that'll give you a window into, how much money should we actually have in our reserve to, fix our community. There's two ways to kind of look at this. Some of you may be on the boat of, you have an updated reserve study, right? And you have a good reserve fund. And honestly, this is kind of my association right now, my sub-association. Like we went through a very hard time back in 2016, 17, and 18, but we overcame it. And, at that point we had like 200,000 in reserve, right? But now we have our reserve up to like 3 million. So that's really good. We have a lot of money in our reserve. But guess what? We really need 6 million to deal with all of our aging infrastructure problems. And so now for us as our association, we're trying to come up with a plan to fix the most serious problems first. And then, do a 5 or 10-year plan to address the issues that aren't health and safety issues or, that are important but aren't urgent, so to speak. So that would be, I'm going to call that an association in control and with a plan. So we have our reserve is like 60 or 70% funded. And we know there's issues. We're addressing the most serious issues. But we need to be mindful of not, dumping our entire reserve, and then going back to zero. So we're building it up cautiously over the next 5 years, spending things on the most pressing, urgent, and important issues. And I think, there's probably I hope most of you are in that category. And that's a good, positive way to do it. How are we picking what items to do? A couple of things, we brought in a structural engineer to give us a report. And the structural engineer evaluated our entire property and came up with a list of the most urgent and important issues that are like health and safety issues. Fortunately, we didn't have too many. And we've been, fixing those items. Also, we looked at our reserve study that we update that every 2 years in our association. And we look at what's due in 2024. And we're slowly, addressing each one of those issues throughout 2024. And of course, we've been looking back every year. We've been addressing the issues that are due for, replacement or repair. Since our little hard time that we had at our association about 6 years ago. So most of you might be in that situation. And so the tips are, if you, have aging infrastructure, but you have a decent reserve and you have a plan, you're looking at your reserve study, maybe you've brought out a structural engineer to look at the different things that you have, amenities that you have in your communities, see if there's any issues, you're managing the problem well, okay? On the flip side, an association that has a lot of problems and isn't managing it well, I might give that example of the master association that I'm, currently the board member for, is that everything is falling apart and we have no reserve and we don't even have the votes on our board to do anything. We can't even get a vote to have a master plan expert come in and give us, a plan as to how we should tackle all the problems. And honestly, the problems are so serious that even with my 25 plus years experience in the industry, I'm not an expert on, pools. I'm not an expert on, the clubhouse roof, and I want everything to look uniform when we redo it. Right now, we're just band-aiding everything and everything looks horrible. So, I think, just giving you like a practical example, if you're one of those associations that's, rowing the boat and you're going in a circle and you're not getting anything done, how can we tackle this? Some suggestions that I have for you would be, number one, you have to have a reserve study done, and use a qualified professional on the reserve study that has the credentials. And anybody needs a suggestion on reserve companies to use, please reach out to our firm. We'll give you a couple names that you can interview and pick which one you like best. And then after you get the reserve study done, then you really have kind of like a 360 view of, okay, this is how serious things are. We're supposed to have X amount of dollars in our reserve. And, these are all the issues that need repairs. That would be a really good time to bring in like a master plan company and, have them help you plan out how to, fix all of the serious problems that are in your association. And I think you can communicate with the master plan company like, hey, we can't do this in 2 years because people are going to go nuts if they get a big special assessment. And so there's a lot of good communication that's going to need to go into when you hire the master. And I have some names of master plan companies if anybody's in this situation right now. And in addition to the reserve companies, there's master plan companies I can give you that can help you, navigate through this process. And what the master plan company does is they start out, they do a survey of your residents to find out how the residents are feeling about how things are going. And the survey goes back to them, and then they share it with the community, with the board and the community. And then they just help you come up with a plan, whether it's over 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, to, fix the infrastructure and do it in a way that everything looks uniform, so the community continues to be, beautiful, and it doesn't look like, one contractor do one pool and then another contractor do the other pool and nothing matches and it doesn't look uniform. And they help you plan it out in terms of the financial side of it, and that they work with the board if there's difficulties with the board. Agreeing on this. Now, what do you do if you have a board where you can't get along, right? And you're in that rowboat and it's just going in circles. You cannot get everybody rowing in the same direction. I think bringing in an expert to help you, bringing in a team of experts to help you. So have maybe a meeting of the board with experts, the master plan company, your attorney, maybe your reserve specialist company. And everybody needs to come together and talk about what the problems we're having, why there's a reluctance to address the problems, share the survey results, because typically the homeowners will be giving feedback that like it's horrible that our tennis court is chained shut because the courts are too dangerous to play on, right? We want those fixed, or we want pickleball courts, or whatever, the issue may come back to us from the survey results. And you need to talk through the issues. And typically what we find is if you can have like a meeting like that, that's separate from a regular board meeting where you have adequate time, I'd probably schedule like a 3 or 4 hour meeting. You find out why people might be scared to make the changes, to go forward with a plan like this. And some of the common things that we hear are, it's going to cost too much money, or the residents don't really want this. And, maybe some of the fears might be internal fears for the board members, like they may not have the money to pay a special assessment, or, possibly they don't want changes. They like things the way they are. And the survey results telling them that, hey, our demographic wants this is really helpful in talking through all of these issues. I'm also talking about alternate means to fund these big infrastructure problems that we see. The typical ways that we fund things are through the reserve fund, right? But maybe if you're in this category where you don't have enough money in your reserve, that's not an option. Another option would be a special assessment. And you're going to have to look at your documents to see how, you can do a special assessment. Every set of CC&Rs is different. So it may require a vote of the membership. And that could be a challenge if, people don't want to do that. You may be able to get a loan. There are many banks in Arizona and national banks that give loans to associations to help fund infrastructure, repair, improvements to your community. Again, you're going to have to check your documents. See, that's why you want your lawyer there to talk through, hey, can we do this under our documents? Can we take out a loan? Maybe you do a hybrid approach where, you get some of the money from a special assessment or some of the money from the reserve, and then some of the money from a loan that the association takes out. So there's lots of options on how to fund this, especially if you plan it, long-term plan where you're doing it over a number of years. And so, having that planning meeting, I think is very helpful. And then hopefully you get over, the barrier of not having the votes to move forward. And then you get to the hard part where it's actually, bringing in contractors to help you, navigate these problems. If you have, if it's a large master plan and you're doing a lot of different things, you'll probably bring in like a general contractor to help oversee everything. If you're a smaller community, you may still want to have an expert helping the board oversee things, to make sure that the different contractors that you're hiring are doing, the work properly. And, of course, as whenever you're doing any of these projects, you should be using licensed and bonded contractors to ensure that, the work is being done properly, and that if there's any problems, you can go to the Arizona Register of Contractors, you can, make a claim on their bond, or you can sue them, and they will have insurance coverage if they don't do something right. So these are just some suggestions as you, navigate the process of aging infrastructure. Remember, reach out to your trusted advisors. We are here to help you and help you make good choices as you're tackling huge infrastructure problems in aging communities in Arizona. Okay, we talked a little bit about reserve funds as part of the aging infrastructure. And we shared with you our cheat sheet on reserve funds. If your association doesn't have a reserve fund right now, it's something that you should definitely be thinking about implementing. A good place to start would be to print out this cheat sheet. You can also find the reserve study cheat sheet on our website at mulcahylawfirm.com and start planning the process on this. And again, if anybody needs the names of reserve specialists, reach out to our firm and we can give you a couple names. A question that I typically get is, how much do reserve studies cost? And how often should they be updated? We kind of already talked about that a little bit. At a minimum, they should be updated every 5 years. Like I said, my association's doing it every 2 years right now. Reserve studies cost, really anywhere from about $800 for a really small association all the way up to $5,000 for like a really large master plan community with 8,000 homes. It just depends. You can get a bid from the different companies and they can, tell you how much it's going to cost. One thing I'm going to ask you to be wary of, please don't do this. Don't do a do-it-yourself reserve study from the internet, or don't have your management company do the reserve study as part of like an arm of their company. You want somebody who this is their profession because they're going to give you the best data for, what you need for your community. And they have formulas in the reserve study that will show you how much money you should have in your reserve. What are the things that are aging? When do they need to be fixed? And what's a plan to get them fixed? Okay, let's talk a little bit about what do you do, another problem, serious problem that associations, face. And we're kind of shifting gears now out of aging infrastructure. Now we're starting to talk about what do we do if we don't have enough money as an association? Unfortunately, I see associations in this situation frequently. It's usually the smaller associations And one of the telltale signs is maybe I'm listening in on a board meeting and they say to me, and they say something like, we have done really well at keeping our assessment rate the exact same rate for the past 12 years. Like we've never increased it. And, as it's like, I should give them a prize for that. That is like the worst thing you can do. Okay. Because what's happening is everything around you is going up in price. Your lawyer is increasing their hourly rate. Your management company is increasing their management company fee. Your landscaper is increasing their fee. The water company is increasing the water bills. The power company is increasing the cost to get electricity. And you have this pool of income that isn't increasing along with these other increases. And that leads to deferred maintenance, in my opinion. And so, what do we do if we're an association that, like, we're in a financial crisis, like we can't even pay our bills, right? And so basically, here's some things that I would, recommend. Start out by doing, a 360-degree review. Okay, so take a look at your association's financial situation. How much money do you have in debts each month or annually? And then, how much money do we have coming in terms of income? And this honestly goes hand in hand with your budgeting process, right? You should be doing this every year when you're creating your budget for the next year. So, the 2025 budget is going to likely be done in August, September, or October of 2024. So let's look at what's our financial situation. If you're struggling to pay bills, right? Prioritize essential expenses first, right? So you got to pay the insurance bill, right? That's something that's an essential. You have to pay your utilities, and that's kind of like the fight or flight moment here. So you need to figure out which expenses are mandatory for you to pay if you're in this really critical situation where you don't have enough money. Then reach out to your trusted advisors and talk with them about, okay, how can we get money for our association? Can we do a special assessment for our community? And, look at your CC&Rs because that's going to tell you, do we need a vote of the membership? If you're trying to get a special assessment to dig out of an inadequate income situation, a couple of suggestions that I have would be you have to communicate how serious this is to your membership because we need their vote to get that special assessment passed typically. So have a town hall meeting and lay out what the problems are and why we don't have enough money and how much money we need to get things back on track. You have to do a little bit of a PR campaign on that to get the votes. Also, you should be increasing your assessment rate every year for your association. You should be looking very carefully at, when you're doing your budgeting process, income that's coming in versus your expenses, any anticipated increases in expenses in 2025 when you're doing that budget, later this year in 2024. All of that should be factored in. And I'm not aware of anything that's costing less than it did, a couple of years ago. So you should be increasing that assessment rate to stay consistent with the increases that you're seeing in all of your expenses. And maybe if it's mid-year, that's going to be for your planning for 2025, but maybe you need to increase it mid-year. And you got to look at your CC&Rs to see how the board can increase that rate. You may have to amend your budget for 2024 if you're struggling to get your expenses paid during 2024. And there's likely going to be a vote that's required to increase your annual assessment rate for 2024. And again, reach out to your trusted advisors for any special assessment evaluation and for increasing your regular assessment evaluation. Amp up the communication to your members so that they understand why we need to do this and why we need their yes vote. Another option we talked about briefly on the aging infrastructure is think about getting a loan for your community. There are banks that provide loans. The collateral is future assessments that are coming in. And it may be a way that you can, get out of debt and start planning better for the future. You're going to have to pay it back over time. But it might be a fix that can help you, get through this time. One thing I want to mention, because I have seen boards, ask me about this, and I have actually seen boards do this, and it's gone, so wrong, is sometimes a board member will say, oh, I'll loan the association the money to help us get out of this fix. Or a homeowner says, I'll loan that money to help us, fix this big problem that we have with the pipe or whatever. Please do not do that. That is never a good idea. We shouldn't be doing private loans with homeowners or with board members ever for the association. And again, you should be running all these types of things by your legal counsel for your association. Just kind of in closing on the inadequate income problem, that would be communicate well with your homeowners. Okay, really important that you explain to them how serious the issue is. Be transparent. Share everything with the owners about how serious the problem is. And then work with your trusted advisors to help you overcome the financial difficulties. Your lawyer, your management company, come up with how you can, make plans to financially recover for your association and what the strategy is going to be going forward. Okay, next thing we're going to talk about is budget planning. We've kind of talked a little bit about this under inadequate financials, but we have a cheat sheet that I want to share with you that I think is really helpful. I recommend that you whip this out in August, September, or October of 2024 as you're preparing your budget. It kind of helps you from A to Z. Here's how to prepare a budget for your community. Anybody wants a sample budget, we have a great sample budget that we have in an Excel spreadsheet. You're welcome to contact our office and we'll provide that to you for free. Best way to do that is just email me at bmulcahy@mulcahylawfirm.com and I'll be happy to send you a sample budget. I encourage you to take a look at the budget planning cheat sheet. Whether you're in, like a financial crisis right now or whether you're planning your budget for 2025, it's a good dig out place. It's a good place to evaluate, okay, what are our expenses and what is the income? And, look at the deficiencies in the budget, and look at overages that you may have in the budget and start the dialogue as a board in terms of, if you have a lot of overages, how are we going to make that up this year? Is it going to be through a special assessment? Is it going to be through increasing our regular assessment rate? Is it you take out a loan? Is it going to be hybrid of all these different things? That's very important discussion that you have. Using this cheat sheet as a conduit on that, I think would be really helpful. Because it explains the entire budgeting process. So I encourage you to take a look at that when time permits. Okay, the next subject we're going to talk about is fraud and embezzlement. Some of you may have seen in the Scottsdale paper recently that there was an article about a manager that embezzled over $1 million from an association. This is a scary topic. It's really interesting. Typically, when I teach a class that only talks about fraud and embezzlement in an association, what do you think happens? What happens typically is we don't have high participation because it's such a scary process. And nobody wants to think, oh, our manager is stealing from us, or the management company is, siphoning away our money, or using the credit card for personal expenses for the association, which, by the way, I don't think associations should ever have a credit card. I'd like to mention that here. I don't understand why associations do that. And it's dangerous, I think. But anyways, I just want to take a little bit of time because I've seen some cases recently where, boards have, reached out and said, we have our management company has taken money from us, or the manager, or somebody who works for the management company has, misappropriated our funds. So I want to talk a little bit about, we're going to be sharing with you the Scottsdale Progress article that talked about the embezzlement. But if you Google HOAs and condos in Arizona and fraud and embezzlement, you're going to be shocked at how many stories come up. This is a very common problem. And so what we like to do is talk a little bit about, what associations can do to prevent theft and fraud in their communities. We have a great cheat sheet, which we've shared with you on tips for preventing fraud and embezzlement. And that's kind of a deep dive on the different things. A couple things to think about would be what does it look like? How do we know that maybe funds are being misappropriated in our community? So a quick 411, things that should get your radar up in your community, like, this isn't good. Outright taking of cash. So like the petty cash has been rated by a board member or by maybe your manager. There's supposed to be $1,200 in there and there's $8. Okay, with no accountability, no receipts, nothing. Faked expenses. Maybe they're paying a vendor that doesn't exist, which is what happened in the Scottsdale case that I talked about here earlier. Non-existent employees or former employees still on the payroll, paying them out. Transferring association funds to another community, transferring association funds to the manager electronically, transferring funds to the association's management company electronically. Recently, we heard about a case where the management company, when they took over the property as the new manager, they put the association's reserve account in their name. The association never saw the money again. Okay, the manager misappropriated all of the money. And then when the association went to the bank and said, we want to see how much money is at our account, there was no account. It was all gone. The manager had put it in their account, commingled it, spent it. So I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm just saying there's some reminders here. The reserve account should always be in the association's name. The reserve account the money should only be accessed, by a majority vote of the board. And it shouldn't be able to be transferred electronically because that's typically where most of our money for associations is located. Okay, what's some other examples of what misappropriation or fraud or theft looks like? Use of association funds as collateral on a personal loan for a board member or a manager. Seen that too. Number 6 would be showing investments on the financial statements as CDs, but actually they don't exist. The money was taken and was never reinvested in the CD. So making sure that we're checking that the CD actually exists and having an actual, statement from whatever bank you have the CD with showing that the money's in there and when it's going to be renewed or, when you're going to have to renew it when it expires, et cetera. Then a manager paying personal bills with association funds. We've seen this many times where the manager is buying donuts, putting, rental cars on the credit cards of the association. Again, the credit card of the association is just a bad idea. So paying personal bills with association funds. Another thing I've seen is the manager is just writing a check to APS for their home, personal bill for APS using the association funds. And because the check was made out to APS, no one questioned it, that type of thing. So again, these are, it's scary, but it's important that we talk about it. So what are some warning signs? You're never getting your bank statements from your management company. Maybe they're really behind on getting you your financial statements. So really behind would be, we haven't had a board meeting in 3 months and they haven't given us a financial statement, showing anything about our finances for the association in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or whatever it is. So missing bank statements, not giving financial information to the board should be a big warning sign. General ledgers that don't balance. Missing and altered documents. So the management company is giving you a lot of photocopies, or maybe they generate, a summary of the bank statement. You want to see the actual bank statement. Unexplained cash shortages should be like the biggest warning sign to you. Like, we're overdrawn. Why is an association overdrawn? That should never happen. Or maybe everything's an emergency. The APS bill is due tomorrow and I need, we don't have enough money to pay it, and that should never be happening in your association. Unauthorized credits to receivable accounts, increasing past due accounts. So you're looking at the bills, you're the treasurer, you're paying the bills, and you're seeing a late fee on everything. Everything's being paid late, probably because they're juggling the bills, right? Because they're taking money and they're juggling bills because the money that should be there has been, stolen by somebody. Let's see. Duplicate payments to vendors. Be careful on that. Paying a vendor twice and maybe the money gets signed over to, whoever's stealing the money. Let's see, unexplained overdrafts. So all kinds of overdrawn notices from a bank. That's a horrible sign that things could be, potentially problematic financially for your association. Somebody may be stealing your money. Let's see, unauthorized purchase transactions. So, like I said, buying donuts, going to coffee, buying every morning you're getting coffee on the association's credit card. And then payments for, other unspecified services. So a check's made out to A to Z Corporation. You've never even heard of that. And you look it up, it doesn't even exist, right? And so, maybe whoever is writing the checks is, creating these false entities. And it's not something that's a bill that is for the association. They're just cashing that check and taking the money. Okay, so if you are in a situation where you think that there may be theft or fraud going on in your association, you have to reach out to your trusted advisors. If it's your management company, you want to reach out to your attorney. You want to make sure that the attorney is going to keep confidential what your allegations are. So you don't want to reach out to an attorney who's really cozy with the management company, right? You want an independent attorney. Our firm never works we don't represent any management companies so that we can stay neutral. And our client is always the association and never a management company. So if you're in this situation where you think there may be something funny going on, reach out to an independent attorney who has expertise in the area of HOA and condo law and talk about it with them, right? Our firm has been through this process, unfortunately, with several associations. We have a lot of very good suggestions. You may need to make an insurance claim. We need to get the person who is misappropriating funds, boxed so that they can't take any more. Get them away from having any access to the financials, et cetera. Their name off of everything. Take the credit card, cancel the credit card, whatever the issues are. We need to put that person in a place where they can no longer harm the association. And we'll help you through the process as you, navigate it. I hope nobody is ever in this situation, but if you do find yourself in the situation, we have a lot of good practical tips on how to resolve it. Our firm has oversaw, a manager that took money from an association, and we put that manager in jail. And we were able to successfully get insurance proceeds on a fidelity bond to get repaid a portion of what the manager had taken. And, so we've been through this process. We can help you. I hope it doesn't happen to you. But if it does, we're here to help you. And any independent attorney that does this HOA and condo law work should be able to help you too. Okay, let's talk about, what are some things that you can do to prevent this so it doesn't happen to you? Just as a quick, final topic that we're going to talk about before we get into the questions. So keep your association's financial records up to date. Do not let your manager or your board member, if you're self-managed, fall behind on creating the financial statements, giving copies of the bank statements to the board, creating a budget. Everything should be current. Now, remember, with bank statements, we're always a month behind on the financials, right? So I have my board meeting this week on Thursday. It's our March board meeting. I'm going to have the February financials that we'll be reviewing, and that is normal and customary in our industry. Okay, another tip to, make sure that you're being vigilant and taking control of your finances. Assign control of the reserve funds to the entire board, not to the management company and not to one board member. Monthly financial reports should be prepared and made available for board review. What you should be getting in your board packet should be a balance sheet, a statement of revenue and expenses, and a comparison of actual revenues and expenditures to budgeted amounts, which is typically called like a year-to-date budget. You should also be getting copies of bank statements for any accounts that the association has, like the original bank statement, a copy of that. Any CDs, your reserve account, all of that needs to be accounted for and shown to you every single month in your board packet. Some management companies don't like it when I say this, but another suggestion I have is have two board members sign all checks that are over a pre-designated amount. So maybe any check that's over $2,000 and that's not a regular bill, we have two board members sign. Before signing checks, any check signers should review the invoice and make sure that, you're paying the bill for your association and that it's not for the manager's, private, APS bill. Keep only a small amount of petty cash on hand and in a secure place, and have a procedure for keeping track of the petty cash. Regularly review delinquent receivable balances. So if money's owed to the association, you should be looking at it, seeing that it's being corrected, etc. And that the money that's coming in is actually in your accounts. Make sure you're purchasing enough fidelity insurance to cover volunteers, board members, the management company employees. $50,000 in a fidelity bond is probably not enough. You want to look at how much money you keep in your sweep account, like your bank account for your association every month, how much is still left in there in the sweep account. And obviously your reserve account should be totally in control of the board, and only majority of the board can, move funds out there. But it depends on how much fidelity, insurance you have. I would recommend more than 50 grand, but it may be a good question to talk about with your insurance agent when your policy comes up for renewal. Hire a CPA to do an audit, review, or compilation every year if you can afford it. If not, take 3 years of records to the CPA and say you randomly select a year to audit, or 5 years to the CPA. You randomly select 2 years out of 5 years, or 1 year out of the 5 years. But just knowing that there's going to be an audit, review, or compilation is a deterrent to anybody who might be going to be stealing money from you. If your board discovers that the funds are missing from your association, remove the suspected fraud perpetrator from a position of control and remove them from access to your finances. Notify your insurance carrier, bring in your trusted advisor, legal team that's independent from the management company to give you advice on how to proceed. Okay, so we kind of covered a lot of topics today. What are the biggest problems that face associations, and how you can successfully navigate them? I'm so happy to report that we had over 150 attendees here today with us on Zoom, which is awesome. I'm really so pleased to see that. It just is reaffirmation to me that these virtual classes are helpful, and that people are interested in attending these classes to learn more about these hard topics, these difficult topics that we are all facing. We're at the concluding remarks now. I hope everybody had a great St. Patrick's Day on Sunday, and hope you have a wonderful Easter or Passover with your families and friends this month. I won't see you again before that holiday. Keep your eyes out for our Mulcahy memo going out on Thursday this week. We're going to be including a survey asking for some feedback from you. What topics do you want to see for our classes for the next 6 months for Mulcahy Law Firm? And these would be the Neighborhood Services Virtual HOA Academy classes. So if you're not getting our Mulcahy memos, you should be, because twice a week we're putting out a memo on an important topic that pertains to HOAs and condominiums, legal aspects of running an HOA or condominium. So if you want to be added, please put your name in the chat right now, that you'd like to be added, or contact me at bmulcahy@mulcahylawfirm.com. And so it's really important when we send out that request for, what are some topics you'd like us to see, like us to talk about. We listen, because we're doing our planning right now for July 1st through December 31st. So we have to come up with 5 or 6 good class topics, and we want to hear from you to find out what are the topics you want to hear more about. We're also want to remind you that we have our next First Friday event will be Friday, April 5th at 9 a.m. And that will be coming up very quickly. And remember, First Fridays, for those of you who may be joining us the first time today, First Friday is an opportunity for you to have your questions answered for free. It's on the Zoom platform, and we also broadcast live on Facebook Live, and you can submit one question and we answer it during this call, during the Zoom call or the Zoom video conference. And if you're not able to attend live with us at 9 o'clock on, April 5th, you can watch the replay of it on our Facebook Live page and see what the answer to your question is. Next, a couple classes we have coming up in April. We have a surprise HOA summit. This is actually going to be in person on Wednesday, April 10th, in the evening from 6 to 8 p.m. And we're going to be talking about what are the roles and responsibilities of board members. And it's going to be at the Scottsdale HOA Summit. Contact the City of Surprise to register. We also are going to be putting some information on that on our website if we haven't already. Another class that we're teaching is our Virtual HOA and Condo Academy for April. That's going to be on Tuesday, April 16th at 11 a.m. We're going to be talking about navigating stormy waters. So how do we deal with difficult people and difficult situations in HOAs and condos? So difficult owners, difficult board members, difficult vendors. We are going to get the skinny on how to best manage that during that class. So we hope that you can join us for that class, which will be our 4th Neighborhood Services Virtual HOA Academy for 2024. So happy Easter to everybody. Happy Passover to everybody. Please enjoy the beautiful Arizona weather before it gets too hot. If you're so inclined to do so, we would sure appreciate a review of our law firm on either Google or on Yelp, because the feedback that you provide to us on these classes, we share that with the neighborhood services departments from all around the valley. And that just shows them that these classes are valuable and that, we want to keep them going through 2024 and into 2025. And I think by the participation we had today, I think we can all agree that we have a lot of people interested in these classes. So it helps us to have those reviews to pass on to our neighborhood services department. So thanks everybody for being here today. Have a great rest of the week. Take care.